So given that she's able to hold those two things in tension, on the one hand, the necessary link of the cyborg to the informatics of domination, but on the other hand, this connection to a technology that's more than a simple political economy. Given that ambivalence, do you sometimes try to take a similar stance in your work? Like, for instance, recently when you were speaking about Obama and the Arab Spring, you seem to be similarly ambivalent, if that's the right word, on the character of emancipation and violence in terms of charismatic liberalism. So you recently said that, quote, the cultural values of charismatic liberalism, from democratic participation and education to women's rights, are set in force by the forces of technologically enabled globalization, unquote. So does Obama, as sort of the shining light of this liberalism, represent an ambiguous entanglement of emancipation and violence? And could you think it in similar terms of political economy on the one hand and an essence of technology on the other?
Yeah, Obama's like future perfect liberalism. I mean, he's the future of liberalism because he's got a winning formula, winning for the United States, that is. The formula doesn't have episodes of violence, it is a violence. And at the same time, it has elements of real benediction about it. It's the sublime. Obama's formula is this, which he articulates with real feelings of authenticity and has convinced most of the world of it. And it's a good thing in many ways. And just withhold moral judgments, of the ethical judgments at this point. Its formula is this. Its rhetoric will be based on the Christian precepts of the Sermon on the Mount. Now, it's very different than George Bush. George Bush, violence was always centered, and it's going to be a violence of you're with us or you're against us. And it really had its origins in the Old Testament. And really the notion of we're living in end times, Armageddon is around the corner, and that there are certain signs which were waiting to be worked out. The fall of Jerusalem, Jewish-Palestinian conflicts, everything was read within the scripts of the book of Revelations itself. That was an old and now superseded formula. And I analyzed that once in a text called Born Again Ideology. I'm really interested in this question of political theology. Obama departs in a significant way from that formula of Born Again Ideology because he changes the text. He changes the text from the book of Revelations to the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount, of course, is about human frailty and concern about the divinity of human subjects and about human mercy itself. And you can see that very clearly and eloquently when Obama, for example, a couple of years got up at Cairo University and gave such an evocative speech. And I thought, I wrote a whole essay on it because I just thought this speech is really important, in which he began to speak about the universal rights of Muslims and criticized the United States very openly for its lack of tolerance towards the Muslim community itself, and said that it's very rich that someone like myself would come to speak to you today as the representative of a colonializing culture itself, which has held Muslims in contempt. So I thought, well, there's truth-saying which is going on here, and then began to speak about the possibility of a general human community based on notions of solidarity, human fragility, and real attempts for understanding between cultures, even though you're aware of the practical political differences in perspectives. I thought that's the first time anyone's holding a position as the emperor, head of an imperial empire, has really tried to open up a general critical political discourse itself. And sure enough, 2 years later, the explosion happens, the Arab Spring. Most people won't say this, but I'll say it. I think the Obama speech was central to this in supporting the aspirations of the young in Arab countries, and just really beginning to articulate the possibilities that change might be afoot itself. But at the same time as Obama says that, the formula remains true. And there's a deep continuity between Obama and Bush. The continuity is murderous violence. Obama goes back after that speech in Cairo and gives another speech at West Point called The Long Gray Line, in which he then says, it's really an articulation of the just war, that there are things empires can do because of what Albert Camus would criticize with implacable fury on the basis of absolute values, universal human rights as conceived by the empire itself, things which the empire has to do to defend its strategic interests, which the West has to do to defend its own putatively describes self-interest itself, all cloaked up in this moral glossarial called the just war itself. And behind the just war, of course, is an apparatus of murderous violence. I mean, what American imperial culture, I've been reading a lot recently. I keep trying to think, why do I read so many books on American military strategy? The histories of the Civil War, the history of the Iraq War, not written by historians, but written by the generals themselves. I think because the technology that American empire does the best is the technology of killing, of murderous violence itself. It's precise, it's analytical, it's absolutely glorified within the culture. It pervades the culture itself. It's the language of violence. So what we have here then is a language of the Sermon on the Mount mixed with murderous violence, and they're just interpolated. They fluidly move back and forth one to the other itself. It's a new contemporary formula itself, and for the next several years, this will be the formula of empire. So I don't know, Liam, do you want to go back to that, answer your question?
Kind of, yeah. So there's a continuity then with the violence of the Bush regime and the mercy that's now put forward by Obama. And there's a tension there, but it also seems like the mercy of the Obama administration is actually built to some extent on the prior violence that the Bush regime and the American government, generally speaking, instituted. So,
because the theoretical is amazing. I've been reading Donald Rumsfeld. No one reads Donald Rumsfeld. I've been reading him very patiently and tactfully. And I'm just stunned to realize that the military strategies that Obama prefers, which is use high technology, drone attacks, special forces, who is the creator of these? And the person who forced the Pentagon to adopt these was Donald Rumsfeld. So really, in some ways, Obama's actually military strategy is the fulfillment of Donald Rumsfeld's most fervent dreams, actually.
and Donald Rumsfeld is Pauline then?
Oh, some sort, yeah.